Hi guys, it's Misty. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited to be back into card making and sharing videos with you. I wish I could say I've been on an extended vacation for the last 2 months, but unfortunately I was dealing with some health issues. But I feel great now, and I was having withdrawals from my craft room and card making and even editing videos, as weird as that sounds. I really enjoy editing these videos. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be back doing this again. Thank you guys so much for your sweet messages. I really appreciate it. It was really fun to read them, and they always put a smile on my face. So thank you guys so much. I decided to make a shaker card for this week's Simon Says Stamp Wednesday challenge. The theme is called Bling It On, and we are featuring products from Stamping Bella. All right, I couldn't leave all of the Copic coloring in, but I always like to leave a little bit in, so I'm just going to color the mermaid. If you are not into watching people color, there should be a time on your screen telling you where to jump ahead to, and you will bypass all of this coloring part. And if you are still here, you should probably just go ahead and skip ahead because I am horrible at Copic coloring, and having not done it for a few months, I'm even worse now than I usually am. So, oh my goodness. Okay, so I did my best. Skin colors here, I'm using really simple colors that I always go to for skin tones. Throwing in a little bit of that BB00 just adds a nice shade to it. And, you know, you can't tell that it's like a purple color, but it just adds a really nice shade to it. And I don't mean shade from the color. It doesn't leave like a purple shade. I just meant like shade, like shadow. Hope that makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to go back and forth. I started with my lightest color, and then I went to the E13. And I wasn't sure I was going to use the BV00, and then once I went to the E11, I realized that I did want to add some more shadowing, so that's when I added the BV00. So now I'm just going back through the colors and blending it all out. And then lastly, I'll add the E00 again and just kind of blend it all together. So what I meant when I said I'm not a great Copic color, I'm still doing pretty okay at this point. Oh, added a little R20 to the cheeks. Still doing all right. It's when I started doing the hair is when I realized how out of tune I was with my Copic coloring. You'll see here in a sec. You're in for a treat. Okay, so for this mermaid tail or fin or mermaid tail, I guess it's called, I was inspired by another card maker. And I'm going to put a link to the post on the Stamping Bella blog because I know the gal's name is Michelle, and I was trying to case her card, or not her card, but her the way she colored the mermaid tail. And I'm just going to leave a link to the post because hers looks much better than mine. I was trying to case the coloring on the fin and mermaid tail, the tail. I was trying to case the coloring on the tail, and then I was going to, practice on this one and then color another mermaid and try 2 other colors. I wanted to try like a lime green and maybe a yellow together. And so I made another background, but then I ran out of time before this was due, and so I haven't colored my other mermaid yet. So hopefully I'm going to find time soon to try this again. Since I already have the background done, I just have to color the mermaid. And I want to try this again now that I've tried it once with some other colors. This was supposed to be kind of my practice mermaid, but I just ran out of time. So you definitely want to, and it doesn't say a last name, it just says Michelle. So that's why I'll put a link to the post. You can see her coloring, how it looks much better than mine. And definitely want to give her credit for that. I just don't know her last name. So here on my hair, I don't know. I was starting in the middle of the head instead of where the part line is. And luckily I was able just to scoot it to the left a little bit because you can see where the part is. So I don't know why I was just starting in the middle, but Luckily, I was able to save that part a little bit, but the curls are hard. I'm just, oh, you know, you're supposed to flick it with the hair. You're supposed to use the flick motion, and well, first of all, you have to be right over the top of it to do that flick. So it's kind of hard. This is when I wish I had a different camera angle sometimes, is when I'm doing stuff like this. So trying to be over the top of it, trying to flick it, but it's such a small area, especially when you get to the curls, that it doesn't look like a flick at all. It looks like I just did a line of a different color. So it was starting out okay, besides me trying to create another second part in the top of her head. But as I added the colors, I just kept overdoing it, and well, it is what it is. You know, the rest of the card is pretty. Just the coloring isn't quite great, but I know I'm being hard on myself. That's what I do. I'm just hard on myself. I want to color better, but you know, when you don't do it for a couple months, you get a little rusty. And it wasn't that great to begin with. So it's on my to-do list of things I want to improve. I wanted to leave this part in here. I'm using this new product by Fawn. It's the liquid Stardust, and almost messed this part up too. It's really, really concentrated, so I put it on my craft mat here, and I added a little bit of water, and then I realized I'm using Copic friendly paper, not watercolor paper, so it kind of looked like some of the beads wanted to bleed out a little bit, but you know, I just made it kind of look like a little shading on the pearls and left it at that. It looks good when you turn it to the side. All this, it's in the shaker card, and you can't see a lot of it, you know. I mean, a lot of the little details when it's in a shaker card, they're kind of hard to see. But if you turn it in the light and you look at it from the side, it's nice and pearly. But I really like this product, so I'm doing it here on my Bristol Smooth cardstock because that is, you know, water friendly. Did the same thing, just added some water to it, and then I flicked it on. And I wasn't quite getting the coverage I wanted with the paintbrush, so I used that flicking brush from Tim Holtz. Tim Holtz Distress Flicker Brush. I'll leave a link to it below, but it's called something like that. And it leaves just a really pretty, like, pearly splatter. And love this stencil. This is from Honeybee Stamps. It's the Ocean Scene Builder. And it has two different rays stencils. There's 4 stencils in the package. And I just happen to have this kind of pearlescent ink cube. It's a Delicata pigment ink and white shimmer, and it matched perfectly with the splatter. It had the same look I was going for. So I wanted a light rays coming through, like, you know, light from the top of the water, but I wanted it to be subtle as well. So this color was perfect for that. And added a little bit of shimmer. And then for the other ray stencil, I'm going to use the Nuvo Moonstone, what is it called? Nuvo Glimmer Paste. But I forget the name of it. It's the one, Moonstone. Is what it's called. Okay. And I did both because of the challenge. You know, the challenge is to add bling to your card, and I thought this is a great way to bring bling to my card. So, and it looked really cool. One of the sample backgrounds I did, I was testing it to see which one I wanted to use. I hadn't intended to use both, but instead of doing it, I didn't want to ink blend 2 separate sample pieces just to try out the stencil. So I did it on the same sample piece, and it looked really good together. So that's what I went with. That's my thought process. Happy accidents. And the card is really dark at the bottom. You know, so you really can't see these very well, but you can see them through the shaker window, and it looks really cool. I love adding black soot to the chipped sapphire, because when you add those two together, blend them together, it gives you this really dark navy color, and that's what I have at the bottom of this card, and I absolutely love that color. There's not quite distressing that I've found that's that deep and that dark of a navy color, so those two colors together are a great way to get that color. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add the Nouveau paste. And this paste looks good on any distressings. I haven't seen an ink blend where it did not look good on. I love this stuff. I want to do it as more of a statement on a card instead of just kind of in the background, but I was happy to use it on this card. Yeah, it looks really, really good over distressings or ink blends. So I'm putting on a light coverage here, and then I'm just going to go over it with my little scraper there and scrape off any excess. The stuff dries pretty quick, so I'm trying to move quickly. You can see I have my soapy water off to the right there, and once I get off all that I don't need, then I'm just going to drop it right in the soapy water there. Look how cool that looks. I love it. I think they look really good together. I don't know if the two stencils are meant to be used together, but I thought it looked really cool. Now I'm here trying to decide what size to use. I still have to put the craft or the foam tape around the frame, so I didn't want it to be too thin. I put in the title of this video that this is the easiest technique for shaker cards, and I definitely think that's true if you're doing a full frontal shaker window like this. I'm going to put a link up in the top right hand corner because there's some other techniques I've done for shaker cards that are also easy. It just depends on what kind of shaker card you're going to make. I like using craft foam for my shaker cards as well, and then if you have a fuse tool, that's another easy way to do a shaker card. But the foam tape is really easy because you just put it right around whatever the shape of your window is. All right, so I'm using heat resistant acetate. That's very important if you're going to do heat embossing on it. And an important step you just saw me do there, in my opinion, is cleaning it with water and a rag. I just spritzed it with water and then I wiped it with the rag, and that'll get off any residues from your finger, oils from your fingers that may have transferred to the acetate when you were touching it. I do that a lot on my cardstock. I touch it with my hand, and you can't clean cardstock. And then when I put the embossing powder on it, you could see where my fingerprints were. So definitely clean the acetate with water, and even more importantly, make sure you use the anti-static powder generously. It's gonna want to stick. It's staticky, and then if you use that anti-static powder all over where you're going to heat emboss, then it will eliminate it from wanting to stick all over the place. Now, it looked like it was going to stick, but once you tap it, most of it should fall off. There was still a little bit up in the top left-hand corner, but it was away from my sentiment, so it was easy to wipe away. But it also heats up much quicker on acetate than it does on cardstock, so just make sure you watch it and move your heat tool continuously, and then you shouldn't have any problem. And then I just gave it a second or two to cool down before I wiped off that anti-static powder. You don't realize, how much you touch it until, like on cardstock, where you can see that, like my fingerprint where I touched it. It's because I usually put lotion on before I do a video, and those oils get on the cardstock and you can't see it. Now here's one thing I should have done before I put the acetate on is, since I'm using the negative space that I cut out, I should have used the frame here on my my card base as my guide, and then glued the center in place so it would go exactly where I needed to go. Usually I don't use the center, or a lot of times I don't use the center. I'll have a different background, and so I didn't even think about it, but I mean, I'll still figure it out. I'll show you what I do here, but it would have been easier to use it as a guide before I put the acetate in. And then that way you can't, you make sure you don't have any gaps on the side when you look through the window. I still wasn't really, even though the negative came right out of this piece here, when you use the craft foam and it pops it up, so you can still kind of see on the inside around that negative piece and around the edge of the card, you can see it too. So that was bothering me. I didn't like that. I didn't want it to be white. So I'm going to do some quick ink blending before I put the front, or before I put this on my, I think I did a top folding card base. So I was only going to use one layer here. I don't need 2 layers. I'm not sure why a lot of people use 2 layers, but my sequins always move around just fine with 1 layer. But I decided I wanted to pop up the mermaid so that the sequins would go behind her instead of in front of her. And so I do add a second layer. Now here, I loved the bubbles that came in the stamp set, but I didn't know if it was going to look funny going over the treasure chest. I don't know why I can't say that. Over the top of that. So I just took a piece of scrap acetate and quickly heat embossed it so that I could see what it looked like. I'm a visual person. I have to see things to know what it's going to look like. That's kind of why I did a sample background to see how the rays were going to look and see which one I wanted to use, because I just have to see it. So I was afraid this was going to be hard to stamp because I already had a layer of craft foam tape on the back, and ink sometimes wants to shift easily on acetate. So I just made sure I was really careful when I stamped it, didn't press too hard, and just did my best. And luckily it didn't shift at all. So I'm gonna add my second layer here, since I'm gonna pop up my mermaid. And I didn't pop up the treasure chest because it was the mermaid I didn't want the sequins to pile up in front of, so I just glued that on the background. Another important step when you're doing the foam tape here is to use the anti-static powder again and go around the edges, all the way around the edges, and then that way your sequins won't stick to the adhesive on the foam tape. And then I'm just going to take my rag and I'm going to wipe off the acetate so that you can't see any of that powder. And here's where I realized that I should have used the frame as a guide to glue my centerpiece in place before I put on the acetate. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this and line it up perfectly, because I didn't like that you could see white through the window, and I didn't like that you can see white around the edges too. So it's a cut, it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, but because it was popped up on 2 layers of foam tape, you could still see the white in there. So I'm just going to quickly do some ink blending on the actual card base itself, but I'm just going to protect the back of the card so that I don't get any distress ink on it. And I'm not worried about being precise here because you're only going to see it a little bit through the window and then a little bit on the outside if you look at the card from the side. I know it's little details like this that just drive me bananas sometimes. So this is probably an unnecessary step, but for me it was necessary. So since this isn't Bristol Smooth cardstock, which is what I like to use for ink blending, it's not going to blend as nicely, but you're not going to see anything but that outer edge. So it looks kind of ugly from from this point, but nobody's going to see any of that. It's going to go behind the whole card. And I had ink everywhere at that point. I was afraid I was going to get it on the white part of the card. And I just kept adding color because I wanted it to match the color of the the card front here. So that was my main concern, is just getting enough color on there to match the card front and the negative piece there. It wasn't so much about having a nice smooth blend. So I just added the tape to my centerpiece there, and I'm gonna line it up the best I can, and I just pressed on it through the acetate, and that worked pretty well. And since I have the ink behind it, it was, you know, even if it was off a little bit, it wasn't gonna be so crucial because you're not gonna see white behind it now. So I'm using these glue pens. I used a gold one for the gold in the treasure, and then I'm using the silver one just to pretty much go all over my mermaid here. I put some in her hair, I put some on her mermaid tail, and then I put some on the shell and on a little bit on the inside of the flower. I used the Nouveau crystal glaze on the shell and then on the center part of the flower, because I just love the way this makes everything look, especially when it has glitter behind it. It looks really cool. And then I decided to add some to the gold pieces as well. Just another little detail. It adds a little bit of dimension, and of course, you know, it makes it glossy. It's all in the details. So the chest here I glued right to the background, so that way the sequins would fall in front of that. And then I used a bunch of foam squares on the back of my mermaid to pop her up. And I should have went around the edges with the anti-static powder. I didn't think it would stick because I just should have used it, because some of the sequins are sticking behind her a little bit, but most of them are clear or translucent, so they don't really stick out. But I should have went around them with the anti-static powder. I'm using a couple different sequins here. Mostly it's the Little Things by Lucy's cards, and they change quite often, but there's always sequins that are similar than the one I used. The one I used is called Sea Spray, which I don't see available anymore at the Simon Says Stamp store, but there are several that have very similar colors. And then I added some jewels from Pretty Pink Posh as well. And I wish I would have added more sequins. That's the hard part with putting it on the background like this. Well, even if I would have put it in the window, which some people do, and then put the back on. I don't like doing that way because I don't like not being able to see it. But it was hard to, there's my big head. It was hard to tell that if I had enough in there, and I wish I would have added more. But, you know, lining it up, you have to get right over the top of it, because I just didn't want it not sitting on my card base right, or crooked, or too much to one side. So sometimes you just got to get right over the top of it like that. And I know this video is getting really long, but there's all these parts that I wanted to share, you know? It's hard knowing what to cut out sometimes. I'm almost done, I promise. So I heat embossed these bubbles on here, which I thought looked really cool, but the challenge is called Bling It On, so I just had to add a little bit more bling, and I love these iridescent bubbles by Studio Katia. So some of them fit perfectly inside some of these bubbles, and some of them didn't, so I still have white bubbles showing, and then I have these iridescent bubbles on top of some of them, and I love it. I think it's a perfect finishing touch, and that is it, I promise. Thank you guys so much for watching this video if you're still there. If you aren't subscribed to my channel and you are still watching this, please click on that subscribe button. Obviously, you're diehard if you are still watching this, and I would appreciate if you would subscribe and ring the bell, like this video if you actually liked it, and a big thank you to those of you that are already subscribed. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your support. All of the supplies I used are listed and linked in the video description below, and you can always head over to my blog for more information. Thanks. See you next week. Bye.